Good morning and happy Sabbath, church family.
Good morning.
Sorry. Good morning and happy Sabbath, church family.
Good morning.
There you go. My name is Maxell Valcin, and it is an honor and pleasure to preach to you today. And I want to welcome you once again, or welcome you to our Youth Sabbath, and thank you for continuing to support our youth here at ECC. I want to thank God for this opportunity because if He didn't do this, I don't know where I would be. And for also waking me up this morning. And also for bringing my family out here and supporting me. I want to thank you, Pastor John, Pastor Debbie, Mr. Oscar, and Ms. Jackie for allowing me to preach to His people today. I'm going to start off my message this morning by talking to you about pressure. All of us feel it. It doesn't matter how old we are or where we come from. We all know what it feels like to be under pressure. It could be like a test you're worried about passing, or a project you're worried about you won't meet the deadline for, a music recital, or dealing with something mean your friend has told you. Regardless of all that, we all know what pressure feels like. And it's usually a bad feeling. I'm kind of feeling under pressure right now. You see, the Webster Dictionary defines pressure like this: the burden of a physical or mental stress, the stress of matters demanding attention, and a weight on one's emotional well-being. And demanding attention on one's emotional, I said that already, not bad. In other words, pressure can include strain, worry, tension, and uneasiness. Pressure can do some interesting things for people. For pressure, people can go faster than they already thrive under it. They work harder and achieve more. For others, pressure can make them crumble and they fall apart. It's also like that in nature too. The absence of pressure in the atmosphere can bring about changes in the weather. Many of them are disastrous at times. Clouds, rain, and storms are all caused by pressure. But pressure can bring about good things in nature too. I'm sure you've heard about how diamonds are formed. Did you know it takes about 825 pounds of pressure per square inch at over 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit for a piece of coal to become a diamond? But can you imagine that type of pressure? It would crush most things. But in this case, the diamond is able to become its true self because of the pressure it's able to endure. This morning, we are going to take a look at a man who faced pressure again and again over in his life. And every time, God gave him the ability to succeed. Travel with me, if you will, to the ancient kingdom of Babylon, one of the most powerful empires this world has ever known. Now, there came a king where his name was Nebuchadnezzar, and he just taken over Jerusalem. And this is where our story today takes place. Because in addition to bringing back the precious items of the city temple, and after taking over the city, King Nebuchadnezzar did not want to waste his talent that the Jews knew they possessed. And so he brought back with them all the best that Judah had to offer. Let's look at what Daniel 1 tells us. Daniel 1 verse 4 tells us that King Nebuchadnezzar wanted to fill his royal palace with young Israelite men who had nothing wrong with them. They were to be handsome and well-educated. This guy's a picky guy. They had to be capable of learning and understanding and able to serve in his palace. They were to be taught the language and the writings of the Babylonians. And among these men was Daniel. Now, we don't know too much about Daniel or how he came to be there, but as a young man myself, I can imagine that Daniel's stress of being in the new land with new people and underworking of a new king who did not know God. The first we hear about Daniel is that he's already under pressure. You see, the king wanted to bring some food for his royal servants to treat him out, which is a good thing. But Daniel sees that this isn't right. He knows that he shouldn't eat certain foods, and even so, he's a servant here. Daniel does the unthinkable. He says no. You didn't hear me, church. He says no. You see, when Daniel sees people eating the king's food, he turns to the guards and asks, "Can I eat other things? Because me and my friends can't eat this stuff. So just give me and my friend just 10 days of just eating vegetables and drinking water. Because we won't be weaker or less intelligent. Rather, we'll be stronger." And after 10 days were over, Daniel and his friends were stronger than anyone. Amen? And although that Daniel was working in a foreign land for a foreign king, Daniel had the courage to say no when he needed to. You see, under pressure, Daniel stood his ground. Let's look at another example of the kind of pressure Daniel faced. As the years went by, Daniel gained a place in the palace as one of the king's advisors. Around this time, King Nebuchadnezzar started having a strange dream. Each night, he would get up and fall back to sleep. Get up and fall back to sleep. So he couldn't sleep. And so he knew this dream was important, so he called his astrologers and his wise men to help him understand it. The wise men, when they were trying to figure out what it was, the king couldn't remember it. So the wise men were stumped. And they said, "Nobody, king, listen, nobody on earth can tell you what this dream means." But King Nebuchadnezzar didn't want to hear that. He wanted to know what the meaning of the dream was, and also what it was. And so he ordered for all the wise men to be killed. That's really ruthless, guys. Wow. So the king's army went out and took Daniel, his friends, and the rest of the wise men. And yet again, when the soldiers arrested Daniel, he does the unthinkable. He asks to see the king. Can you imagine the wisest men in the land couldn't help know what the dream was? But Daniel says, "I'll go." I wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, that's scary. I'm going to get killed. Like, come on now. And so, filled with courage, Daniel goes under pressure to the king and asks him for God to reveal the dream to him. And that same night, God shows Daniel the king's dream and tells him what it means. And so Daniel goes back to the king and shares with him what God had told him. Let's take a look at the king's reaction in Daniel chapter 2. Then King Nebuchadnezzar threw himself down before Daniel and worshipped him. And he commanded to his people to offer sacrifices and burn sweet incense before him. The king said to Daniel, truly your God is the greatest of gods. The Lord over kings, he tells his people what they don't know. For you have been able to reveal the secret." You see, church, under pressure, Daniel trusted God even more. The final story we'll be looking at regarding Daniel happens much later in his life. Because it doesn't matter how old you are, you will still face the pressures of life. Many years after King Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel risen to the top of king's advisors. And during King Darius' reign, Daniel was one of the king's most trusted men. You see, the higher we get, the more people get jealous of us. And that's exactly what happened to Daniel. We pick up the story in Daniel chapter 6. It says, because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Then the other administrators and other officers began searching some fault in the way Daniel was handling the government affairs. He was always faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. So they concluded our only chance of finding grounds accusing Daniel will be in his connection with his religion. The only way the jealous advisors could get at Daniel was through his faith in God. And so they devised a plan to arrest someone who prayed other than the king for the next 30 days. Anyone who prayed to their God for the next month, or who prayed to God and then the king for the next month, will be thrown into the lion's den. And we already know with Daniel, when things get tough, Daniel's faith gets tougher. And so Daniel goes and continues to pray to God, openly and without shame. Because of his refusal to back down under pressure, the advisors have Daniel arrested and thrown into the pit of lions. And so the king was trying to sleep, but he couldn't sleep. He tried to eat his dinner, he couldn't eat his dinner. He tried to drink his wine, he couldn't drink his wine. Because he was scared for Daniel's life. Sometimes God does that to us to remind us. You see, in the morning, the king runs down to the pit and shouts to Daniel. And he says, "Tell me your God has saved you." And the king was overjoyed to find out that Daniel was just now waking up. He was like, "What's going on?" And he told him that God had sent an angel to shut the lion's mouth. And he never even had a scratch on him. And yet again, Daniel's faith brings someone else closer to God. Let's look at what King Darius decrees. He says, "I decree that everyone throughout my kingdom should tremble before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God. He will endure forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule shall never end. He rescues and saves his people. He performs miraculous signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." You see, church, Daniel relied on God. He was rooted in his faith. And because of that, every time Daniel faced pressure, he relied on God to help him. This doesn't mean that Daniel never had problems or he never messed up. You see, Daniel wasn't perfect, but he continued to trust in God no matter what happened to him. And because of his consistent faith in God, Daniel brought others closer to God as well. There are so many lessons we can learn from Daniel's story, things that we can still do today to live a better life. Let's talk about a few of those lessons. Number one, eat healthy. Daniel's story teaches us that it pays off to be healthy. Now, we don't have to be vegan or vegetarian like Miss Jackie or anything like that. But Daniel knew the healthier we get, the stronger and productive we are. Give it a try. Go without eating meat, or be like Miss Jackie, or dairy for a month. And you'll see, if you don't start feeling better, you'll start feeling better. It's true. It really does matter what we put into our bodies. And Daniel knew it. And modern science proves it too. We all face stress a little bit better with the right nutrients in our body. We learned today, lesson 2, keep trying to do your best. We can also learn from Daniel's story that we will never be in a situation where we can't try our best. You see, sure that Daniel was captured and he didn't know anybody, but they didn't stop him from trying to do his best every single day. And it wasn't just some secret why Daniel rose to the top or be able to do some amazing things. He wasn't a superhero. He wasn't Superman. He just kept trying to do his best. And we can do the same thing. Are you struggling with something? Keep trying to do your best. Do you feel like you're getting nowhere? Take one day at a time. God will help you every single day, just like he helped Daniel. Amen. Lesson number 3, talk to God. We can learn from this story that it pays off to keep praying. Our connection with God is one of the most important things we have in this life. And we need to make sure that we maintain it. Can you imagine if you never talked to people that you loved? If you said, "I love you" to someone, but you never communicated with them? Church family, we have an awesome God. Amen. Church family, we have an awesome God. Amen. And he loves us very much. And it really should be a joy for us to talk to him every single day. And the best thing is that we don't really need to kneel down and pray to talk to him. We can talk to him whenever we want, however we want, and wherever we want. Because he's always there, and it's not just through prayer that we communicate with him. We do it every single time we sing to him, every time we come to church and worship him. Every time we laugh, smile, we're saying, "Thank you, God, for loving me." The fourth and final lesson I want to point out to you today is that we can be a witness to Jesus wherever we go. Daniel may have been a captive in a foreign land, but he showed God's love everywhere and to the power of kings, everywhere he went, and to the mightiest of kings. These mighty men got to know God and worshiped him because of Daniel. Daniel showed them who God was, no matter what his situation. And we can do the same thing. Every day, everywhere you go, we have an opportunity to show God's love. You don't have to say his name to show people God's love. All of you have to do is just be nice, be courteous, be respectful, and go the extra mile for someone. Smile at someone you don't know. If you see someone struggling, go offer to pray for them. Don't just say, "Oh, I'll pray for you," and then forget about it later. Pray for them right then and there. Because it doesn't take much to show love to people. It really does make all the difference. You know, in Daniel's life of obedience, it kind of reminds me a lot like Jesus. Jesus remained faithful no matter what the situation was. He always stayed connected to his Father. He always tried to do his best. And Jesus loved everyone, even to the point of death. Jesus is also the perfect example of life well lived under pressure. Think about everything Jesus faced. Jesus was born without a doctor, lost his earthly father, he had to put up with jealous siblings, his coworkers didn't have a clue what they were doing, and he was attacked left and right by turned people who he didn't know that they were the only chance of survival. Imagine the kind of pressure Jesus faced when he knew his time had to die. In the book The Desires of Ages, Ellen Wright writes this: Jesus had earnestly conversing with his disciples and instructing them as he had neared Gethsemane. He had strangely become quiet. He had often visited this spot for meditation and prayer, but he never, with a heart full of sorrow, upon this night of his last agony. Throughout his life on earth, he had always walked the light of God's presence. Now that his days were numbered with the transgressors, the guilt of the fallen humanity he must bear. Upon him, he knew no sin, but he laid iniquity for us all. So dreadful does sin appear to him, so great is the weight of the guilt he must bear, that he is so tempered with fear, it will shut him out forever from his Father's love. Feeling how terrible the wrath of God is against transgression, he exclaims, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death." Now, take a second and imagine how Jesus must feel in that very moment, walking to the garden with his disciples, and he knows what's ahead of him. No matter what we've been through, none of us, and I mean none of us, will feel the pressure of what Jesus felt. Because we'll never even come close. Because we would have to carry the humanity's sin and everyone in the entire world and know it's up to you to save them all. I can't imagine what that feels. We fall apart even from the smallest problems come on our way. To face the ultimate pressure point would be, for most of us, unbearable. But what Jesus does is, in this unbelievable pressure, what does Jesus do? He turns to God. He says, "Father, help me." He relies on God completely to help him. And Jesus does the unthinkable. He wins. He wins, church. Amen. He goes through the torture, the crucifixion, and the death, and he wins. He rises up from the dead 3 days later to declare victory over sin for us all. He also faced pressure of this life, and he also won. And through it all, Jesus never complained. He never said the pressure was too much or choose someone else or any of that, because he always turned to God again and again for help, and God was always there for him, just like he's there for us. ECC, when we're rooted in God, just like Jesus was rooted in us, we'll be filled with faith like Jesus was, just like Daniel was. You see, these aren't just some lessons where we tell to our kids to promise and they behave. No, this is a real story of Jesus and Daniel. Real stories about how we should act in the face of pressure. So church, I want to ask you today, how do you want to react when you're under pressure? Do you want to crumble and say, I can't do this? Do you want to be like Moses and say, choose my brother or my friend? Or do you want to say, here I am, use me? Answer to that voice if you hear them calling you. Because it was as for Daniel and for Jesus, the choice is ours to make. You see, church, we can choose to believe in the faithful. We can choose to be faithful in the midst of our problems. We can choose to believe in the God of Daniel, Joseph, and Esther. These aren't just some stories. This is how we should live our lives every single day. Doing our best, sharing God's love, and relying on God every step of the way. Church, you don't have to keep living the same way you have been, afraid of failure and being alone. You don't have to keep living that life, because Jesus won the victory for us. He won for you and I. He won so that you are never alone, that you will always have God on your side, helping you, loving for you, caring for you, delivering you, no matter what. You see, church, we know that we can feel peace when we remember that God loves us. We can face anything. So, church, I want to remind you today that we can choose to believe in the God who does what He says. And you can choose to believe in the God of faithful promises, because He will never let you down. Thank you.